One more minute.
Okay.
Yeah,
Again.
that's how you know I'm here. Okay, I'm gonna cut my microphone so you can.
Cool. Gotta spice it up here. Put a new background on.
I like the homework, Adam.
Oh, thanks. We'll see. I think the last one got a little wordy.
If there's anyone that we didn't confuse in the last class, we could cover them in this class.
Yeah. All right. So, oh my gosh.
Oh man. I liked your dance, by the way. You and Ava. Ava's a good dancer.
She's getting it down. She went to, she had her dance class a little earlier today too. They're gonna be doing Peter Pan. So she said she's either gonna be Tinkerbell or what's that? Tinkerbell or so I'll find out more later. Well, it's okay. Okay, so first question. If we set a coffee cup on a coffee table and then we leave the room, if we set a coffee cup on a coffee table, then we leave the room, at that point, is the thing that the name, quote, coffee cup refers to a wrong sin or a cheat sin?
Are we talking about the person who left the room?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, like, just try to keep it as simple as possible.
Cheat sin,
right?
I think it's still a wrong sin in your school.
All right. Yeah, and I think we keep opening up different. We keep going down different rabbit trails too, kind of trying to flesh that out. So I think we might come to a conclusion where we find out that Ben is correct here. So
I say it's neither one.
That's going to be a problem.
Okay. So in this instance, let's see.
Angela says it's MEPA.
It doesn't exist, does it? So is the term? Oh yeah, the term coffee cup would be referring to a cheat sin because the quote coffee cup is referencing the logical deduction that the coffee cup must still be on the coffee table.
That's good.
But the question was
Adam.
Yeah.
Does its position determine whether it's a cheat sin or wrong sin in the sense of like, because we see it still being there? Is that what?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think so. I think that's like the main distinction that we were getting into is like if we basically, if we take the coffee table, we put it on the coffee cup, and then we leave the room, we're kind of referencing some memory or some deduction that it must still be where we left it. Maybe I'm not understanding the question there, Word.
Yeah,
no, that was my question. I'm just wondering. I don't know, but that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, it was that was the whole crux of the class last time. It was kind of, that's like the basis, and then we use that to start talking about the memories of that deduction.
Right. Okay.
Yes. So you're asking, can we have a deductive, accurate perception of an actual changing thing in this school?
Maybe I'm not. Yeah. That's cool if you think that I'm asking that. It's a little bit more sophisticated. I was trying to, I was really just trying to be as surface level as possible because it is kind of,
But I have a question.
Yeah.
About your first question.
Yeah.
There's two ways you could see the coffee cup that's in the room after you left the room.
Right.
One is you could remember it was there, or
Right.
two, you could deduce that it's still there because you didn't see anybody come out of the one door with your coffee cup, and
Right.
nobody jumped out. In the second case, it's a chichen, but in the first case, where it's just a memory, in this school that memory is not a symbol,
It's not accurate. Yeah.
You
and
can
therefore
remember
the
it
object.
was.
And if we hold off going into this further, we're gonna pick this up.
Okay.
We're gonna pick this up.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So let's say we're going to use the following syllogism to kind of look at a drupja, which I haven't heard referenced that often. We usually hear about sulsum 1 and 3, 3, 2, not 3. But the drupja was something that's a little different. So I thought it would kind of give us a chance to get familiar with that. So
Good.
Consider the coffee cup I left on my coffee table. It must still be where I left it because I have no evidence to believe otherwise.
Hmm.
So what's the drupja of this syllogism?
It must still be where I left it.
Yeah, Gessler said,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'll just go ahead and say it. Yeah. So he said, you said whenever you hear drupja, you think 1 and 2, right? Again.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Mhm.
So
You
the
think
way
what?
It means in Western logic they call it your assertion, the
Right.
assertion. Yeah.
but it's combining the subject with the assertion.
Well, that's the test.
the assertion
Isn't that the
of 1
drip
plus
teacher?
2. Yeah. The second one is the quality being asserted. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I got this one wrong then. So, well, I guess we'll see once I supply it. So, is the reason given a takyan daki drupja?
No, because it could have been moved.
I mean, yeah.
Well,
I guess so. I mean, with the context from what Gessler was kind of saying in class, he was holding a coffee cup and he put it down on the coffee table and he said, I have no evidence. There's no sound. Nobody's been here. Right? There's a small, like, kind of infinitesimally kind of small probability that something may, like, it might just pop out, but it's so incredibly improbable that something like that would happen. So we have no evidence to believe otherwise. We could say that maybe there was a two-headed purple elephant rampaging in the room after who knocked it off of the table. But
or Ava.
or Ava, yeah, yeah. So I said it was a correct reason, because just from what Gessler was using in class, that's kind of what I was using to build this. I guess, if I would have spent more time, I could have drawn something. Like, I thought about including or not including the word believe here, especially, right? Based on belief in Nietzsche and how we can't be entirely reliant on something, and proving something without the shadow of a doubt doesn't really require belief. What's going on?
By the way, let
You
me
slow down a little
let me
bit
Yeah.
in your speech.
Let me say one thing though. Everything given as a reason is a takyang. And everything that exists and everything that doesn't exist is a good reason, but not in a certain context. So you have to say in a certain context. Okay.
Yeah. And we'll get to that in our vocab.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
all right. So let's see if I can remember. I can't remember what I wrote here. So the drupja of this syllogism can be stated as follows, and this is where I might need you to look at it again. So the coffee cup I left on my coffee table, which would be 1, must still be where I left it.
Mhm.
And so would that be a correct way of stating, like, the drupja? Or would it simply just
it's a little complicated, but in general, you're okay. But there's different ways to say it in Tibetan, but
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah, generally, there is a drupja. The cuff must be where I left it, and generally it's a Takyang duck for that. Yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
Well, maybe just
Although we wouldn't use the expression so much. Everything's a Takyang duck in group chat. That's the problem. Okay,
okay.
it's just you have to say in this logical statement. You have to add those words. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's all technically.
Yeah. Well, I guess
But in general,
to everybody.
in general,
Sorry again. Sorry.
okay, you're okay.
No, I was just going to say to everybody watching, maybe just disregard this one then, and I'll come back. And
No,
try to
it's
clean it.
okay. It's okay. In general, it's a good one. Yeah.
All right. So, with respect to the viewpoint of the second school, the Sautranticas are memories and recollections, accurate perceptions. And what reasoning was given to support their position? There was
It's
a lot.
not,
Sautranticus?
because it's,
No, right?
it's not, it's too vague.
Yeah.
Memories are very fuzzy.
Yeah. I mean,
And
they're just,
also-
but they're making a claim, but they actually use some logical outflowing of that to say why they thought that was the case. They said it was vague, or that it was like, I think I used the word in the answer, like it was like a degraded form of the original.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good. That's cool.
Well, I guess we'll kind of go through this one together. Yeah, so the second school holds that recollections are not an accurate form of perception because memories do not have the same efficacy of the original perception. In other words, memories are not a form of accurate perception because they are degraded forms of the original thing.
Okay, good.
And so I thought about going back to the last syllogism that we had there.
Ooh.
I'll look at it, but I don't know if that was a good choice or not. So let's bring this into focus by utilizing the lens of the syllogism given in the previous statement. When we prove to ourselves that the coffee cup we left on our coffee table must still be where we left it because we have no evidence to believe otherwise, we do so via a deductive accurate perception. However, if at some later point we were to recall where we last left our coffee cup, this would in turn be a memory or a recollection. So it's not an actual deduction.
Okay.
And the coffee cup must still be left on the coffee table, which the second school would say is no longer an accurate perception because it's a memory.
Okay.
Furthermore, the Sautrantico proponents say that there is no difference in quality between the objects given in those two instances because they're both cheat ends.
Which two instances? Oh, deductive accurate perception and a
Recollection of the deduction.
Memory.
Yeah, now I have to question. Yeah, okay, I guess you could say that. Okay, whether the cheat set exists or not is another thing.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of I think that's a large part of Dharmakirti's viewpoint, is distinguishing whether or not mental images are the reality of mental images.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore it'd be there in Upala, this was the reasoning that they used. I don't know how convincing it is. This is just what we were given in the text. It would be meaningless to have more than one perception because the deduction could have been the recollection, and the recollection could have been the deduction. And they're essentially they're the same in quality. Like they're both taking place in this non-space of the mind.
Just as valid.
Yeah. And so it's meaningless to have one or the other. And Geshe said specifically that another kind of logical outflowing of that would be that you could, in this Sautrantic is, well, hold on.
Adam, can you try to talk a little slower? Our translators are going to quit.
Yeah.
Is that a memory? I hope not.
No.
Yeah. If I recall, Geshe had said that if this were, from their point of view, if hold on, let me think. Let me think if I can rephrase this.
Mhm.
And once a logical outflowing of this would be that we could simply live in memories, and that we would essentially wouldn't have to be engaged in direct perceptions.
Okay.
Anyways, I thought it was cool because I asked Geshe in class too if this was the reason that the second school uses to say that memories are not valid forms of accurate perception. And Geshe said, I don't know, I thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
That's why I included this
Mhm.
question, because it seems to be a pretty pivotal topic. You know, a point of distinction between the schools. So take with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
You know, Adam, in my notes, I had a conditional that if it were true that there was no difference between the two, then it would be useless to have them both.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So Jawa.
Consider.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim said to measure or to weigh or to consider is good.
Yeah. I've seen evaluate other places too. What about Shidan Jawa?
Related to a basis.
Yeah. It's connected to an actual thing too.
Okay.
And Shichikitendo. And you could use if you're having trouble with this one, Geshe said that in that all reasons are Takyangi Drupjas. However, he used a qualifier
On a particular
in a
context.
particular sense. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. In a particular context.
Good.
So
Okay.
this is what I have here. And Geshe, you gotta
Uh,
I think the last sentence I was having a hard time. Yeah, I guess we'll get there. But
Chester Sotowa Soki Kin Medbed, Simon Wachi, Mike Mikaba Shop, Tom Kapamikam, Jotsula Kapayuba Chicken, Mame, Garden Tower, Marshall and Shimmy, Garden Tower, show me each. Demi Tapa Jawa Dapa Yinla. What is the day? Is it we're talking about Jemba or Cheshe or
Cheshe, yeah, I think it's referring back to those two instances. The Na and Chi, the original and the latter perceptions.
Okay, so when you first figure out that sound is changing, right? And then you remember it? Is that it? It was, I don't remember the context. 3:30.
See if I can pull it out.
Oh, sorry. Let's see here.
Mitak Pachuchin.
Oh, okay. Now I got it. Let's see here. Jepak de Cheshe Sugushin, Sema Karachi, Ten Medication, no? Amy Tabajo to be in love. Oh, no, Tabach. All need Semen Nason, my Jeffrey people return. Some days, show time. Right then, show each other. Yeah, he's talking about this is a Kachik, right? And he says, let's consider impermanence. let's say you understood it at 3:00 today. Okay. And then at 4:00, you were thinking about it
Hmm.
and you said, yeah, I think that was correct. Okay. Jamitan, ma jepa yope go yoki jamitan toki jepak sema day. Shower day dry in the show each. Dona jepak de cheshes gershin. Sema kanu chick. Then made the Juro Shina. Okay. Okay. Then he says, Demi tapa jawa dupa yinla. That, okay, now I can come back here. Demi tapa jawa dupa yinla, cheshi satawa sakikamete. Semangachi nike apashel tam the kimekyang. The original perception that sound is changing, and then later on remembering what you realized. These are the two perceptions we're talking about. Number one, I have understood that sound is a changing thing. Number two, an hour later, I remember that I understood that sound is a changing thing. Okay. Do they both, are they both looking at impermanence, changing? Are they both looking at changing?
Mhm.
Are they
Yeah.
both looking at changing?
Yeah.
Yeah, they both gel at least.
Yeah, but gel, be careful, Ben, because gel implies sema.
Oh no.
Because shelja, yupa, shidrup, shi, dunchik, semidrupa, dunchik. Okay?
Okay.
So when you say you gel with something, it has to exist. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
Because shelja is a synonym for existence. Sheja is a synonym for existence. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Emi tapa jawa dupa yinla. Sheshe satawa soki kenmede. Sema ngachi nike mitapa shel tsambe kepa mekyang. Jelsu la kepa yubichide. Ngame dadan dower ma shelching. Chime dadan dower showecher. Demi tapa jawa. What's the subject of the sentence, Adam? What's the day? What does consider mitapa?
What does consider me talk about?
What state of mind is considering changing? We're talking about two states of mind, right? One is where you figured out that sound is changing, right?
Yeah. So we're talking about
one-
one that did so through deduction and then one that did so through recollection, right? I mean, is that still the
Yeah,
same
good.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, correct deduction, we have to say. Okay. Yeah, so one of them saw that sound is a changing thing through logic, and one of them saw that sound is a changing thing through remembering what they saw before. Okay, is the first one pramana? When you logically figure out that sound must be changing, is that a pramana?
In this
Yeah,
school, we would, yes.
If the logic is good, then you have perceived sound with pramana. Then if an hour later, if you remember that you saw that, if you remember that you figured that out, and again, you're perceiving that sound is changing, is that a pramana? In
They
this
say
school,
no.
no. Yeah. Yeah, it has to be fresh. They would call it the whole thing a memory. That not that you're looking at a memory. Yeah. Okay. Because they say memories are not valid because they are not in what do you call it? Infallible, as we know. Good logic is infallible. Memories are not. How's that? They could be correct, but they're not trustworthy. Okay.
Mhm.
If they're not trustworthy, they're not a valid perception. That's for sure.
Yeah, but it's a valid perception that it's not.
No such thing. Okay. Anyway, so I'll ask you this. If I sit in the house and I figure out logically that sound must be changing because it's a creation of causes and conditions, and it's like a pool ball hit with a stick, and the energy is transferred from the stick to the ball. And because the energy in the stick is limited, the energy in the ball must be limited. Okay, that's all. Things have to be changing because the things that trigger them are changing.
Yeah.
If the things that set something into motion are faster and slower, then the thing itself must be faster and slower. That was set into motion. That's all. If something is a creation of causes and conditions, it must be changing because causes and conditions are changing. Their energy is bigger or less, depending on how hard you hit the stick or whatever. Okay. Anyway, so let's say you figure out that sound is a changing thing. All right. And then an hour later, you remember what you figured out. And you think to yourself, I remember that I figured out that sound is changing. Okay. According to this school, the second perception is not a pramana. It's not infallible. It's not infallible. It's subject to the vicissitudes of time. Right? Okay. So anyway, de mitaba jawar dupa yinla. I'm going to reverse myself, Ben Kramer, and just say Jawa here as it sinks, okay? So does the memory think that sound is changing? Yeah, right? Is it necessarily correct? No, because it's a memory. Then the thing here is, if you say that the memory is always correct, right? Okay. If you say that you figure out at 3 o'clock that sound is changing, and then 4 o'clock you remember that you figured out that sound was changing, is the memory perceiving the same sound as the logic was? And they say, now they say, yeah, you could say that. You could say that. Well, then the status of the original logic should be also recollection. Then you can call the original logic recollection because they're both equally valid. And you could call the second thing logic. Okay, they're both perceptions which are infallible. Okay, so why have a second one? Why not just say one? That's his point. Okay, that's his point. If they are equally valid, why separate them? Say again? He says, yeah, we say just because they have the same referent doesn't mean that they're both infallible. Just because they both are perceiving changing doesn't mean that they're both infallible. Okay. All right. Tawasoki ken mede temangachi nike mitapa shel samdu kepame. The first sema and the latter sema, the first perception and the second perception are the same in that they are the same only insofar as what they are perceiving. The first perception and the second perception are the same only insofar as what they perceive. Okay? Say Jelso, but there's a big difference in how they are perceiving it. Are they perceiving the same thing? Yes. Are they the same in the sense of what they're perceiving? Yes. Are they perceiving it in the same way? We say no. One is airtight logic and one is shaky memory. Okay. Ngame chirte ngame dadan delaware mashal ching chime dadan delaware shawaiche. And then he says, because the first one is using a word and the second one is not. The first one is depending on the use of a term, and the second one is not depending on the use of a term. Yeah, we got to go back to the original. Can we do that? Adam, can I go back to the text?
Yeah.
Let's-
Can I ask? I mean, maybe we'll get into
Yeah.
it. But I just wanted to.
Yeah,
clear something.
I'm not completely sure if this section is about the memory and the, I gotta
Okay.
see the context. Yeah.
Okay, I did. Sorry, go ahead. I'll
Go
slow it
ahead.
down.
No, you go ahead.
I was just okay. So last term, I noticed that you were using perception. It seemed like maybe I'm my recollection isn't as clear, but yeah, you were using shell interchange. You were using perception interchangeably with consideration or considered. And
Yeah, they are.
I noticed that could actually, it could be helpful in this last sentence here to translate it as perception rather than consideration, given the fact that it just seems clunky and it doesn't quite come through. Because there's no consideration associated with the original as sound. Is that, I don't know if I'm being clear or not. Maybe I'm not being too clear. Yeah. So is it I guess I noticed in the first book, we would definitely use terms differently for different English terms for the same for the same Tibetan term in the Dura, because at different points, like Sheja, for instance, right? And I'm just wondering here if even within this section where we're talking about Shelja a lot, if we can float back and forth between consider and perceive.
It depends on the context. Yeah, it depends on the context.
Okay.
Yeah. When you say that Sheja and Shelja are synonyms, when you say that all knowable things and all gellable things is the same, in that case, gel must be translated as consider. Something you're considering and something you know is the synonym in Buddhism. Something you can think about with an accurate perception and something you can know with an accurate perception is the same thing. And it means existence. These are synonyms for existence. But there are cases, even in your Dura, where gel means to consider in the sense of weigh a question or think about a question from different viewpoints or stuff like that. So it depends on the context.
Okay. I'll give the screen back to you again.
Okay. Let's get back to this. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to the context and work ahead again. Okay.
Okay.
And let me read it. Okay. Let's consider changing, the fact of something changing. Okay. Let's say that you are a person who has used an accurate perception to perceive something changing. For example, the fact that sound is changing. Okay. So is changingness something that you can perceive with an accurate perception or not?
It is.
Good. And then when you later, if you hold on to that idea that sound was changing, are you still perceiving the same changingness that you perceived when you were doing it logically?
And this school, we would say no.
And I agree. I would say no. Okay. So majepa yope gulwe gyuki jami dot doki jepak tema de shawata. So are you saying that when a person figures out that sound is a changing thing, and later they remember that sound is a changing thing, is the second perception a pramana?
No.
Is it a pramana that sound is changing?
No.
When you remember that sound is changing, even if you earlier saw correctly that it was changing, are you figuring out that sound is changing with accurate perception?
That's something that was thinking about. And to me, I would say that you're almost doing the same deduction again. I mean,
I'll say it again.
okay.
I'll say it again. So you figure out that sound is a changing thing. Later, you remember that sound is a changing thing. Is the second perception figuring out that sound is a changing thing?
No, it's just a recollection, is what the text is saying.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. So here it says, "Majepar yope gulwe gyu," in the mind of a debater who still remembers that he figured it out. Okay. When they understand that sound is changing, do they do it are they doing it in the second point in time with accurate deduction? No, it's just a memory. Is it correct?
No.
Yeah.
Is sound changing?
Yes.
It's correct.
Yeah.
The memory is correct. It's not a valid perception. Okay? In this school.
Mhm.
In the higher school, it would be a valid perception. Okay. But it's not a JPOC. It's not a deduction. It's just a memory. He's not sitting down and thinking about the reasons and figuring it out. This in the second case, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think they would call it direct because it's false. It's not a perception. It's like getting drunk and seeing elephants. Okay. Okay. Now, is he still having a perception based on sound?
Yes.
That's the thing here. The other guy says, do you agree that he's still having a perception based on sound when he remembers? And what would you say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the other guy says, if you do agree, then the original logic must have been a recollection. And Chase Secure and Semmakanu Chik then Medicure. In that case, if it's still showing, if it's still an active perception based on sound, okay, then it must be a valid perception. If it's a valid perception, then it's superfluous. You don't need both of them. Okay. Cheshe, Jebak de Cheshe Shigurichin. Then you could have Jebak, then you could have valid logic that was just recollection. Okay. Gyurishin, Semakano Chik Dunmed Gyur. Then either one of those would be extra. You wouldn't need it anymore. Okay. If remembering was a kind of valid perception, you don't need the original valid perception to create the memory.
I don't understand that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that guy says Shena. That's my opinion. Demi Dr. Joa Dupa Yinla. Now our answer is yeah, I agree that the memory is considering. I agree that the memory is considering changingness. Okay. Chawaso Dupa Yinla. No, it has to be. I agree that the logic is considering changingness, but that doesn't mean it has to be a memory. Okay. Ken mete. Semangachi Nike Mitapa Sheltsam to Kipame. Let's go ahead and just keep going. Okay. Maybe we'll figure it out. I say both of the semas are the same in that they are considering changingness. Okay. Kepame. Kepame means they are the same. The memory and the original logic are the same, but only in the sense that they are thinking about whether something is changing or not.
Mhm.
In that sense, they're the same. Okay. they are considering Jawa, whether sound is changing or not. But that's the only thing they're similar. Okay, they're both wondering whether sound is changing or not. We say that in that sense, they're the same. Okay. Jetsul, La Kepar, but how they consider it is a big difference. The first one is considering changing with logic, and the second one is considering changing with remembering. And so I agree, they're both thinking about changing, but there's certainly how they're doing it is different. How they are weighing changingness is completely different. Okay. Name, the original logic, Dadan Dawa Mashal, is not doing its consideration using words. And the second one is.
Oh, so draw would not be sound here. It would be words. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
I was flirting with the idea that he's referring to sound as rangsen, the actual cup or something. Okay. Sound. The thing you're referring to with the sound, what you call coffee cup is a real coffee cup. And then the idea the idea of coffee cup is unchanging. The sound is changing. The name coffee cup is changing. Is it?
No, the name isn't, but
Form, I
The
guess.
dot is the sound coffee cup.
its referent would be.
Form, isn't it?
The sound is changing, of course.
Yeah, but then the nominal term that we're applying is unchanging.
Right.
And now, suppose you read da as what you are considering is impermanent or not. Okay, suppose you take da sound. Isn't that the classic example that we take when we're discussing whether something is changing or not? We say da chichen mitakte chibicher. Da chichen mitakte chibicher. Okay, so when you're using logic, is the mitakpa connected to da? When you use good logic, when you say let's consider sound, it's a changing thing because it's made. Does the changing apply to sound? Yeah, Jod and Del were here, okay? And then when you think later, I remember that sound is changing.
Yeah.
He said, here, the Rangluk says, our side says, that's not sound anymore.
Now, when this draw here being used as word, and now there's a term, there's a label in my mind, almost the mental image and the term that goes along with it. But then there's also the physical expression of that word. So if I call something a coffee cup, then that sound would be changing, right? However, the internal thing, I'm just trying to make sure that I get that.
Us guys in this debate, what we're saying is when you figure out with good logic that sound is a changing thing, does changing thing apply to an actual sound?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you remember that sound is changing, does changing thing apply to an actual sound? And they say, no, there's no sound at that moment. Okay. You hear a sound.
Yeah.
You hear a sound and you figure out that it's changing. Okay. Later, you remember that sound is changing, but that sound is no longer a sound. It's a mental concept.
But it seems like a strange argument because it's a mental concept in the first place because you're discussing the sound. It's not that you're actually hearing it while you're debating it in the first place.
Well, he uses this language here. It's when you figure out that sound is changing, is that argument connected to an actual sound?
Apparently, yeah.
In both cases, it is.
Yeah, I would say.
Both
if anything-
cases, Stanley says in both cases, you are talking about the idea of sound. Right?
Right.
He says here, he says, what he says here, Ranglu, we say, when you're figuring out that sound is changing, you are talking, you are the when you are figuring out that sound is changing, the argument is related to an actual sound.
Mhm.
When you're remembering that sound is changing, the memory is not related to an actual sound. How's that?
I wonder if
When
he's going to
you're-
elaborate on that.
When you're having the debate, are you saying you think of sound and you think of changing, and then you decide that it applies to the other? Whereas when you're remembering that understanding, are you thinking of sound is changing, Dramitakpa, which is that's an idea, right? That sound is changing is not sound. That's not a sound. That's not a changing thing. Whereas sound, which you're deciding is a changing thing, is a changing thing. But sound is a changing thing. The
By
sound
the
in
way,
that. Yeah.
Let's
right?
flip it. I made a
Okay.
mistake.
Uh-oh,
I made a
run.
mistake. Let's start over again. I misread it. Okay, let's start over again. It says the opposite. It says the opposite. So now I'm gonna fix it. Okay, I apologize.
Okay.
When you figure out that sound is changing, you are not having a perception which is connected to an actual sound. When you figure out that sound is, yeah, he says not. I made a mistake. Okay. When you figure out that sound is changing, you are not considering an actual sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's concepts. But when you recollect, it is connected with sound. Your perception is connected with sound. That I don't know about that.
We'll just-
Seems
weird.
equally as weird as saying it either way. To make the distinction.
Was he having
let's go-
the debate out loud? Because that would help. If
Let's
you're
go
remembering-
one. I'm gonna let me read one more. We have time, right?
We have
let me read-
4 minutes or so, 3.5 minutes.
Let
We
me
started-
go into the next sentence and tell me if it helps. Okay, maybe it doesn't. Ja dan del we mi tapa shel we. When you perceive impermanence connected to sound, with reference to sound, okay.
Mhm.
When you see, if you are not, well, when you perceive that sound is, when you perceive impermanence as it relates to sound, how's that? When you perceive impermanence connected to sound, okay, you can't be perceiving impermanence.
Mhm.
One more time.
When you're perceiving impermanence connected to sound, you can't at that moment be perceiving impermanence.
Because relationships are unchanging, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that. I'll say it again. When you perceive impermanence connected to sound, you cannot be perceiving impermanence.
Mhm.
When you're perceiving a relationship in this school, you're perceiving something unchanging. So if you're perceiving sound as it relates, if you're perceiving impermanence as it relates to sound, you cannot be perceiving impermanence. Because impermanence as it relates to sound is permanent, unchanging. Okay. That's okay. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
I'll say
Like-
it again.
Quote, impermanence as
When
relates to
you-
sound.
When you're looking, yeah, when you say sound is changing, okay, sound is a changing thing. When you say sounds are changing, you are perceiving an unchanging thing. It's a fact. Facts are unchanging in this school, any school. Like, I'll say it again.
And that's
When
why
you-
he's saying you're not, oh, sorry.
When you say sound is changing, you are stating that statement is unchanging. Okay. What's the status of the word changing in that statement at that moment? I would say unchanging. It's part of a marriage which is unchanging, so it's unchanging. But what he says here is, what he said so far is, when you figure out that all sounds are changing things, it's not a changing thing. That's okay, right? I'll say it again.
It's a concept.
And now I'm going to change it a little bit, see if it's still correct. When you perceive that all sounds are changing things, can you be perceiving changingness? And we say no, because it's an unchanging thing. So how could you say that sounds are changing if at that moment you cannot perceive changing?
No problem.
Okay, let's leave it there. Okay, you guys.
We're at time.
I was gonna.
Yeah, thank God.
We didn't start until 6:40.
What is this?
Oh, this guy's trying to get another 10 minutes. I hear it. Don't mind. Is that okay with you?
I mean, I just wanted to, because I'm on the edge of my seat here. I wouldn't mind getting another.
Yeah, okay, let's go a little bit. If you guys have to go somewhere, leave, okay? Me and Adam are going for another 9 minutes. Here we go. Dada dawi mitakba shawe. When you perceive changing as a quality of sound, if you cannot at that moment perceive changingness, okay? Then then when your mind is perceiving the second instant of a color blue, when your mind perceives the second millisecond of the color blue, you must not be perceiving blue. Okay, I'll say it again. Okay, it's the same author, isn't it? As we had last. It's unfair to have two Kedub J's in a row, and it's unfair to have any difficult text in the evening, and morning's too early.
I did actually go back through the schedule and rescheduled a few things. So that
No, I'm just whining. I couldn't have figured it out in the morning either. Jana Joey Mitaba Shalway. When you perceive changingness with relationship to sound, okay? If at that moment you cannot perceive changingness, okay? Then when you are perceiving the second millisecond of a color blue, you must not be perceiving blue. Huh? It's us, yeah. Then these two cases are the same. What two cases? Number one, if you are perceiving the second millisecond of the color blue, you cannot be perceiving blue. Why? Because when you perceive that sound is changing, you cannot be perceiving changing.
So are you saying the second object is literally, quote, second millisecond of an object?
Say again?
So we've got, right, two objects and two objects. One is sound, right, is an object, quote, sound, versus sound is impermanent, right? Or sound is changing, right? Those are two objects. And then there's blue, right? Quote blue versus the second millisecond of blue, which is also an
let's say
object, and that's not the same as blue.
Let's try it out this way. This is like trying on different pairs of jeans. Sometimes they don't fit. If you perceive that sound is changing in the first instant, and then in the second instant, that can no longer be perceiving that sound is changing, because in the second instant, it becomes a memory. How's that? I'll say it again. If in the first instant, you perceive correctly that sound is changing, and according to you, in the second instant, it's no longer valid because then it's a memory. Okay, well then, anytime you perceive the second millisecond of blue, you must not be perceiving blue.
Well, in the same way that we were saying that there is no difference in quality between the recollection and the original deductive accurate perception, you could say that there's no difference in quality between the second moment, the perception of the second moment of blue and the first moment of blue. In essence, it's just the same. It's like you're perceiving it. You're perceiving that first moment again.
Let me say the whole thing, okay? Let me say his whole point. You ready? And then we'll come back to it, okay? If you are perceiving that, when you perceive changingness with relation to sound, okay? Let's say you perceive that sound is unchanged, it's changing, okay? Then if you are not perceiving at that moment unchanging, okay? In other words, if in this, let's try on this pants. Moment one, you figure out that sound is changing. Moment two, you're still remembering that sound is changing, okay? And according to you, the second moment is a recollection and not a deduction. So you're moving from a deduction to a recollection. According to you, the sound and the changing that you perceive in the first moment is no longer valid by the second moment, because the second moment's perception is no longer a valid perception because it's a memory. I'll say it again. You finally figure out that sound is changing in the first moment. In the second moment, you remember what you figured out. Since the second moment is a memory and no longer a valid perception, the object that it thinks it sees is invalid. I'll say it again. Moment in the first hour, you figure out correctly that sound is changing. In that case, the sound and the changing are valid because you saw them with a valid perception, right? Now, an hour later, you remember that sound is changing. That perception in this school is no longer valid, and what it sees no longer exists because the perception is invalid. Okay,
Yeah.
got it?
Yeah,
Which means, wait. Which means that in the second instant, changing and sound don't exist anymore. Good, got it? Why?
Because they're
That
not.
perception is a fantasy.
Yeah.
That perception is just a fantasy. Okay, now then we say, okay, well, then do you ever look at blue? Yes. When you look at blue, I guess in the second instant, it's not seeing blue anymore because it's just a memory.
Yeah.
It's just in a sense a recollection of the first moment of seeing blue. Okay. Now, let me finish. Then Ngumpo Keche Nipa Zimbe Mikshe, Ngunzen Mikshe Mayamba Giro. in that case, then the visual perception of blue in the second instant is no longer a visual perception.
I don't get it, because it seems to me that second instance would be just as fresh as the first.
Agree.
Yeah,
No,
it's not
because it's a second instant.
Well,
Yeah,
then you
on
could
my
just
calendar.
you could just arbitrarily relabel it first. Like, I mean,
Okay. Let's stop there, okay?
yeah.
I'm going home. Dun, 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 dun,
Okay,
dun.
thank
Go
you.
home.
Should we try to
All right.
redact that?
I taught Stanley and Allison 10 years after Adam. Okay. Going home. Stopped here 1/9/23.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Adam, I suggest the next two sentences. Don't talk till we finish class, okay? Right? Okay. Next two sentences. Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the extra time.
We're trying. Wait, I gotta play a song which is illegal, right?
Don't do it.
Quick, stop the recording.
Yeah.
Stop
Just
the
stop the
Don't I
recording
get
and everything's
10
okay.
seconds? Don't I get 10 seconds or something?
You can have even more.